to my channel. I decided to call my channel a philosophy of science, and this is because on this channel I'm going to cover things related to scientific method or philosophy of science. These are two topics that are interrelated in the extent that there are a lot of things that it's impossible to tell which one it is. So if philosophy sounds somehow suspect to you, this isn't actually in that sense a philosophy channel. This is a channel about scientific method, but if we are talking about scientific method, we have to talk about a bit about philosophy of science. Okay, so that is what this channel is. Why did I start this channel? Well, I have a master's degree and my main subject was philosophy. In addition to this, I did write my master thesis on philosophy of science, and I am currently working my way towards a doctorate. So I think I'm pretty qualified to talk about these things. Well, what I am not is I am not a physicist. So if you are here because you want similar content like Simon Dan or Fight the Flat Earth, this is kind of similar, but I'm not going to be talking about physics because I don't have a degree in physics. I have another degree in educational science, and I have a bit understanding in psychology and some understanding in medicine, but like very little. So most of my examples are going to come from these areas of study, just because I'm more familiar with these areas than with physics. I think there is going to be a topic that I'm going to have to cover some physical experiment and stuff, but well, I'm not an expert on that, so don't expect me to not do any mistakes when I do that. But mostly this is not going to be about physics. Mostly this channel is going to be about scientific method. And I'm going to start covering flat earthers. Why? Because I like to watch flat earth content, just like Fight the Flat Earth or Simon Dan on YouTube, and I have noticed that there have been a growing trend where flat earthers try to use definitions and scientific method to define things like gravity as pseudoscientific. And Sleeping Warrior, whose channel you can see on the screen right now, uses this a lot, and he has no understanding in scientific method, as probably most people already know. But I haven't seen anyone actually going deep into the scientific method and why he is wrong, and like really explaining scientific method and what it means and why he is wrong. People have said some things relating to this stuff, but I haven't seen anyone like actually really go into it very deeply. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start from this Sleeping Warriors video named How the Independent Variable Literally Destroys the Ball. Apply Scientific Method. And I know that this is an old video and this has been ripped to shreds by multiple YouTubers, but every video that I've seen has been covering only the hilarious part where Sleeping Warrior is attempting to make the actual experiment. I haven't seen anybody cover the first part of this video where Sleeping Warrior is quoting like scientific literature and trying to explain what the scientific method is, and trying to establish that scientific method requires an experiment where you straightforwardly manipulate the independent variable. This is like his main argument. And in the first part of this video, he tries to use quotation to make his case. So I'm going to cover that part and explain how he is wrong and why he is wrong. Yeah, that's it. Okay, and now to the video. I'm going to start from like middle of this part that I'm going to cover, and this is because the video is structured weird, because the actual claim he's making is here. It's not in the start of the video as you would expect it to be if you were making a logical case for something, but well, here it is. So let's listen to this.
Is getting the message. The independent variable must be manipulated. It is the presumed cause. There can only be one independent variable. This is science. It's really worth being aware of what it doesn't say is science. You can.
Yeah, so he was making actually two claims. He was making a claim that you always have to manipulate the independent variable. Well, there is actually a problem in how he's defining manipulation, but I'm not going to go into it in this video. I'm just going to assume that he understands what manipulation is, which he doesn't. And the other claim was that there can be only one independent variable. I'm going to cover just this part, just the claim where he's making the claim that independent variable must be manipulated for something to count as being scientific. And if you have an experiment where you don't manipulate the independent variable, then it is always pseudoscientific. So the way I'm going to cover the Sleeping Warrior content is that I'm just going to take one specific thing. I'm going to ignore all the other problems in the video. I'm just going to assume like there wouldn't be problems in any other part of the video to make these videos understandable. And then in another video I'm going to go into these other problems, like the definition of manipulation and things like that. And this video I'm going to do this in two parts, because I think this video alone, if I just start covering few of these citations, is going to already take 20 minutes or something. Okay, so let's continue. Here is his first citation, and I'm going to let this video play.
From Colorado Science and Engineering Fair, the independent variable is the variable which an experimenter deliberately manipulates in an experiment.
Okay, so let's go back.
From Penn State.
So here it says that the independent manipulated variable, the variable which experimenter deliberately manipulates in order to observe its relationship with some other quantity, or which defines the distinction condition in an experiment. Okay, this sounds like kind of, I understand how someone coming from understanding that Sleeping Warrior someone can read this and think this is good for his case, but it doesn't actually. If we are observant, we can see that it doesn't say that this is the only way that the scientific experiment can be made. It just defines what the independent variable means. And yeah, but if we just thing about the manipulation part, it seems to say that independent variable, it requires the deliberate manipulation. But the thing with this, I actually went and tracked down these citations. Yeah, the first thing we should know is that he did write citation here, and he did read something from a source. But the problem is that sources aren't listed anywhere, so it's kind of hard to find these sources. There is here at the top, you can see, oh not now, here at the top you can see there is the actual website, and it says Colorado Science and Engineering Fair. So I was able to find this document, but in order, this is the first point I would like to make about scientific method. In order to this actually count as citation, like he is trying to make it out to be, he should list all these citations, right? Where are they from? Who is the writer of this document, and blah blah blah. I'm not going to go into that, but I'm just going to point out that the first problem is that this isn't actually a citation, even though he tries to claim that this is a citation. A second thing with this citation is that it's from this website, Colorado Science and Engineering Fair, and this is some kind of fair. I didn't read a whole bunch of this, but what I did read is that there is a science competition for high school kids, and this citation is a part, you could consider it as a part of the rules of this competition, and this is just telling what this competition, how this competition is defining independent variable. And if you have a competition, you need to have strict definitions for everything, so you can easily determine who have won this competition. So this is just like, firstly, this is just giving rudimentary understanding to high school kids what these terms mean, and secondly, it's part of a competition. So yeah, no one would consider this as any kind of real citation that you could use to argue what independent variable is and isn't, because that is not even the intention of the writer. It's basic instructions for a competition for high school kids. So yeah, I would call this a fail, obvious fail, like the Team Skeptic would say. I'm not going to have any kinds of meter here. I'm just going to, yeah. And now let's go to the second citation. It's here.
In an experiment.
From Penn State University, there should be 3 types of variables in every experiment: the dependent, independent, and the controlled. The independent variable is what is varied during the experiment. It is what the investigator thinks will affect the dependent variable.
Yeah, okay, so this I couldn't find anymore. It seems that this document doesn't exist anymore. So this is the second point about scientific research. If you're actually trying to do scientific research, it is normally it is advised against using internet resources just because of this, because it might be that when somebody reads your paper or whatever you're writing and wants to see what the actual source is saying, where you are, the source you are citing, if it doesn't exist anymore, he or she can't go and confirm what you are saying. So the problem with this citation, the first thing is that it doesn't exist anymore. Well, it is normal. Sometimes even academic papers do cite internet resources, but it's normally advised against it. People are advising against it. But we can read what we can see here. Okay, it says here that independent is what is varied during the experiment. It is what the investigator thinks will affect the dependent variable. Let's remember what was the claim made by Sleeping Warrior. The claim was that independent variable needs to be manipulated. So if you have the preconceived notions like the kind of notions that Sleeping Warrior has, I can understand how you could read this as meaning that it needs to be manipulated, but it doesn't say that. It just says varied, which, if I understand the English language, means there is difference. There needs to be difference between two categories or two measuring points or something like that. So if you are straightforwardly manipulating something, yeah, that is true. This is going to produce variations, but you can also vary things in a different way. Another way to vary things in an experiment, for example, if we are interested in how gender affects people's attitudes towards meat eating, there is no way to manipulate someone's gender, and gender would be in this experiment the independent variable. So what researchers do is they take people with different genders and put them in different categories, and then measure if there is any difference between these different categories, gender categories, in their attitude towards meat eating. So the meat eating would be the dependent variable, and this would also be varying the independent variable, even though there is not an actual manipulation. And this is the thing that is it's not the only thing, but it's the most important thing why we manipulate things, to make variations. But we can also produce variations just by picking categories or subjects or things in the categories in right way. So second citation, if we just go by what this thing says, it doesn't actually at all it is not at all good for Sleeping Warrior's case. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, here is a third citation, and well, I'm going to first let it play.
From explorable.com. The independent variable. This is what you change in order to provide a result. The dependent variable. This is what you are measuring.
Okay. So, and this is from explorables.com. So this is also a citation that I was able to find. This, you see, explorable.com. This was conduct scientific experiment. It is different. This is also being changed, but it is explorable.com experimental research, and here is the part where it says conducting the experiment. It says in here, it says an experiment is typically carried out by manipulating variables called independent variable affecting the experimental group. The effect that the researcher is interested in, the dependent variable, is measured. So here we can see that it says typically. An experiment is typically carried out by manipulating a variable. So this is already a problem. It doesn't say always, and it specifically says typically, which means that sometimes it isn't done in this way, and still it counts as an experiment. And there's another pretty interesting thing, because I don't know what kind of this page was when the Sleeping Warrior was reading it, but now if we type in here search bar we type in definition. Oh, how quaint. Here is a part where there is actually a definition of experimental science or experimental research. And here it says, the word experimental research has a range of definitions. Oh, really? It's not just a one single definition like Sleeping Warrior is trying to claim. In the strict sense, experimental research is what is called a true experiment. Okay, so it seems that there is at least more than one kind of experiment, and the true experiment is what the Sleeping Warrior is talking about, because here it says this is an experiment where the researcher manipulates one variable and controls randomizes the rest of the variables. It has a control group. The subjects have been randomly assigned between the groups, and the researcher only tests one effect at a time. It is also important to know what variables you want to test and measure. This is the point. Here, a very wide definition of experimental research, or a quasi-experiment, is research where the scientist actively influences something to observe the consequences. Most experiments tend to fall in between the strict and wide definition, and there is a typo. This should say a scientist does not actively influence something to observe the consequences, and you don't have to take my word for it, because if we go here where it actually defines the quasi-experiment, so okay, here is from same website, different web page. This is the actual web page for quasi-experiment, and here if we go to the design, it says quasi-experimental design involves selecting groups upon which the variable is tested without any random pre-selection process. And what does this mean? Well, we can go here. Here is an example. Here, if we study the effect of maternal alcohol use when the mother is pregnant, we know that alcohol does harm embryos. A strict experimental design, this means true experiment. A strict experimental design would include that the mother were randomly assigned to drink alcohol. This would be highly illegal because of the possible harm the study might do to embryos. So here, so what researchers do is to ask people how much alcohol they use in their pregnancy, and then assign them to the different groups. So this was just what I was talking about before. There is no manipulation of the independent variable. Independent variable is just is manipulated in this sense. So we take, for example, people with pre-existing traits and then put them in a different categories, like my example about gender. Here the categorizing the categorizing will be done based on alcohol use, but there is no manipulation. Just here the problem would be that it would be unethical and illegal. In my gender experiment, it would be impossible. So what we can then conclude from this is that this seems to be also against Sleeping Warrior's case if we actually see what this web page says. And this is this is just the thing, because I have studied philosophy 5 years in university. One of my best friends is a researcher who does research on, or is a doctor and does research on philosophy of science. And I know that I understand a bit about these things, a lot more than an average person, but I also understand because my friend who is a doctor in the same subject understand way more. I understand that my understanding is very limited. And then there is these people like these flat earthers, like this Sleeping Warrior guy who hasn't studied anything, and he thinks he can understand these things which are actually quite complicated. Well, this has been pretty easy compared to things that I'm going to cover, but still, if you have no understanding about these things when you start reading these and no one to teach you, it's obvious that there's a high chance that you misunderstanding what you are reading. I can't understand how somebody can be so full of themselves that they think that without any training they can understand these things better than the actual scientists or philosophers or whatever, people who have been studying these things a long time. Yeah, okay, and I think I'm going to make the cut here, and I'm going to be covering one more citation. There is 10 citation actually in this video, but I think I can make my case with just the 4 first ones, and then there is it's not article. I don't actually know what it is, but there is a writing that Sleeping Warriors has philosophical. It's philosophical writing, so it's just up my alley. Okay, does that sound weird? Well, whatever. And so I'm going to be covering also that. So if this sounded interesting to you, then you should come back in a week or something when I get the next video up. I don't know when, but it's going to be probably somewhere about in a week. And then I'm going to cover the 4th citation and a paper that Sleeping Warrior, philosophical paper that Sleeping Warrior thinks he can understand. And yeah, I think I'm not spoiling anything if I tell you that he doesn't understand anything what I'm going to be talking about in the next video also. Okay, so thanks very much if anybody is watching. I'm very happy if you are interested in what I'm doing and find value in my videos. So thank you very much, and if you are here, I hope I can see you again in about a week when I publish my next video. Thank you and goodbye.